Good evening. This is November 24th, 2020. God has brought us through this day. Okay, I thank Him for that. The reason I say this is today is an anniversary of a very sad event. 1 year ago today, November 24th, 2019, my son, Robert Elton Uzzle, passed away. That's one of the hardest things a human being can go through, losing a child. It has been said a wife who loses a husband is called a widow. A husband who loses a wife is called a widower. A child who loses a parent is called an orphan. But they really don't have a name for a parent who loses a child. And so, on this first anniversary of his homegoing, I want to celebrate his life. Some of you listening probably knew him and can probably add to a lot of what I have to say. Some of you did not. In 1980, my wife and I moved from Dallas, Texas to Kaufman, Texas. It had been in 1979 that we were reassigned to, we'd been serving 3 years at Emmanuel AME Church in Dallas, and we got reassigned to Macedonia AME Church in Kaufman. And it took almost a year to find a place to live. The church didn't have a parsonage. Rental property was very scarce, and it took us a while before we were able to uproot and move, but we finally were able to do that. And uh, in August of 1980, the annual conference was at Bethel AME Church in Corsicana, the same church I currently pastor. But this church, well, that day we spent the day in Kaufman getting the three older children, Eric, and Joanna, enrolled in school. Joanna at the time was uh, 5, almost 6. Her birthday is September 25th. And she was almost 7 when she started regular school. We got her enrolled in kindergarten, and shortly after that, Deborah was at the home of some of our church members, and she made the statement, "I feel so good. I got my last child enrolled in school." The following week, she went to the doctor, and guess what? She was pregnant. And on June the 12th, 1981, our youngest child was born at Presbyterian Hospital in Kaufman, where Deborah was employed as a licensed vocational nurse. At the time, I was a social worker at Terrell State Hospital, as well as serving as pastor of Macedonia AME Church in Kaufman. Our son spent his early years in Kaufman. He attended early childhood development there and eventually kindergarten. He finally completed the first grade in Kaufman before we moved to Waco after I started Baylor's PhD program. Here's a picture that was made of him as a small child with his 3 older siblings, Erica, Eric, and Joanna. I don't remember the exact date on that. He was pretty young. I remember the date on this picture. This was on Thanksgiving Day 1984. We went to Waco, and this was Thanksgiving dinner at the home of my mother. And a lot of kids and grandkids and others were there for that occasion. And this is a picture at Macedonia of me in the pulpit and Deborah standing over Robert Elton as he was giving some type of speech. This is a picture of him as a small child sitting between two of his best friends, two brothers, Squig and Derek Prox, who's they're the younger brothers of my son-in-law, Kenneth Prox. Sadly, Derek passed away in 2013. Squig is still living. It was in 1980. I'm sorry, it was 1988 that we moved from Kaufman to Waco. I had resigned at Terrell State Hospital 2 years earlier. I had stepped down from my pastorate in Kaufman in August 1987. And then in May of 1988, Erica graduated from Kaufman High School. We moved to Waco that August to be near my new job as chairman of the Department of Religion at Paul Quinn College, and as I continued my PhD studies at Baylor University. During that time, I became friends with a man named William Halliburton. He is an African American. His wife, Nettie, is Latino. And they have a son named Billy. That's a picture of Billy and Rob, as we call him. They were born 10 days apart. Our son was born on June the 12th, 81. Billy on June 22nd, 81. And I have some other pictures here. This is back in Kaufman. We had long been gone from there, and I was pastor of Wayman Chapel AME Church in Ennis, but Macedonia got me to come back to speak at a special program, and our son joined us there for that. This picture was made in late 2014 in Waco, along with my brother Jim and his son Tim. Tim at the time was living in South Carolina. He's a musician, and he gave a concert in Waco, which turned into a family reunion. Saw family I hadn't seen in many years. It's really good for families when they can get together, especially if it's not for a funeral. And this was made, I think, in 2018. He was living in North Dallas, and I had to help him with some rental arrangements. And it turned out it was on Shrove Tuesday, so I sent him a text saying, "It's Shrove Tuesday, how about some pancakes?" I think it was Denny's restaurant we went to. My son went to school. They say he finished the first grade in Kaufman. He went for the 2nd through the 11th grade in Waco. Then he enrolled as a senior at Cedar Hill High School and graduated from there in 1999. He took numerous online classes and other classes. Um, he he accepted Jesus Christ as his personal Savior during a preteen camp at Latham Springs Baptist Encampment. He was active at Macedonia AME Church in Kaufman and later at Edwards Chapel AME Church in Waco. He attended public schools in Kaufman and Waco before graduating from Cedar Hill in 1999. He received an associate degree from the University of Phoenix Online, a number of certificates in technical support and project management. He was really a computer whiz. He was a student at the University of Texas at Dallas at the time of his death. He demonstrated great talent in music, playing both saxophone and guitar. He was a multi-talented young man. He was descended from my father, James D. Uzzell, who's his grandfather. His great-grandfather was George Wallace Uzzell. His great-great-grandfather was Jason DeShay Uzzell. And based on recent research, it is now believed that the father of Jason, his direct ancestor, was a Kentucky politician named William McNary. We trace the Uzzell lineage to Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. On his mother's side, his mother was the former Deborah Bass. His grandmother, Aldessa Henry Bass. His great-grandmother, Gladys Durham Henry, who was the daughter of Anderson Durham, the granddaughter of Rance Durham, the great-granddaughter of Allen Durham, and the great-great-granddaughter of the African Gabi, which I deal with in my book, The Durhams of Fairfield, an African American Genealogy. He survived, but not only by his mother and I, but by one brother, Eric Bass, a sister, Erica Bass Pronks, and another sister, Joanna Bass Parker. Grandmother, Aldessa Bass, host of aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, one great nephew, many cousins, and many, many friends. And it was on December 12th of 2013 that I co-officiated at his wedding that took place in Durant, Oklahoma. It was a very happy occasion that night. Unfortunately, it did not work out. Within a year, things had fallen apart. Sometime in 2015, the divorce was finalized. He was devastated by his failed marriage. He had had difficulty with weight for many years. In 2008, he had undergone gastric bypass surgery. Unfortunately, he failed to make all the necessary lifestyle changes that's required when one undergoes a surgery of that nature. And he gained all the weight back and then some. Morbid obesity, hypertension, and severe depression were his major health problems. It was on November 21st of 2019 was the last time anybody heard from him. He regularly posted on Facebook and sent text messages, everything else. His last few text messages were quite upbeat. In fact, he even talked about having called for 911 and perhaps saved a woman's life that day. And he was looking forward to completing his bachelor's degree at the University of Texas at Dallas, to paying off some financial obligations, and to move forward with his life. We were certainly backing him 100%, hoping he'd be able to do that. A number of times on Friday, November 22nd and Saturday, November 23rd, we called him and texted him with no response. After church that Sunday, November 24th, we called the police department from the University of Texas at Dallas. They agreed to go out to his house and check it out. Our daughter Erica and her husband Kenneth Bronx also went there, and sadly within an hour I received a call from Kenneth telling me they had found him dead. Very hard thing to deal with. His services were held on November 27th of 2019 at the Griffin Roughton Funeral Home in Corsicana. Reverend Derry Johnson, pastor of Bethlehem Baptist Church, officiated, and the eulogy was delivered by Reverend Jeffrey Fitzhugh of the First Baptist Church of Corsicana. And a number of resolutions were read, including one by Bethel AME Church and one by the Paul Quinn District of the AME Church. One of his friends, whom he shared a common interest in wrestling, were made remarks. And certainly he touched the lives of a lot of people. Since that occurred, we had to have some work done on our alarm, and a gentleman came down from Dallas. He recognized my name, wanted to know if I had a son by that name. I told him, well, I did. He passed away. I showed him pictures, said that was him. Apparently they had done some music playing together, and he thought a lot of him. Of course, that definitely made me feel good. I love you, son. Hope to see you again someday. Your mother and I sure do miss you. God bless.